Look, there are bad ideas, right? And then there's Mr. Silas Blackwood deciding he's going to lay down the law with my bull Titan, especially when it comes to that bull's, let's call them lawn companions. You gotta understand, Titan isn't your average cud-chewing field decoration. This animal operates on a different frequency. He's got a temper that can go from 0 to flattened golf cart in about 6 seconds flat, especially if he thinks some self-important busybody in khaki shorts is disrespecting his personal space, or his gnomes. I'd seen that glint in Titan's eye when Blackwood's ridiculous little electric buggy first whined its way onto our street that morning. It's a look that any sane person would interpret as, "Pal, you are currently auditioning for the starring role in a viral video titled Suburban Idiot Gets What's Coming to Him." If only Blackwood had an ounce of animal instinct, or had bothered to read the seriously don't even think about it vibe. Titan was radiating, he might still have a vehicle that wasn't part of my wife, Clara's new, unintentional, tomato-based abstract art installation. But no. Some folks in Willow Creek Estates apparently just have to learn their lessons the hard, expensive, and very public way. Our particular lesson in public humiliation, or triumph, depending on your perspective, began, as these monumental shifts often do, with something seemingly innocent. Or, in Titan's case, with his rather unique appreciation for ceramic garden ornaments. Titan's my bull, and no, we're not talking some sprawling ranch miles from civilization. We're in Havenwood, Oregon, that sweet spot where the perfectly manicured lawns start to give way to something a little more. Let's call it free-spirited. My wife, Clara, she adores it. Says our place has character. It's our little haven of happy chaos. And our daughter, Maya, May to her legion of online fans. She's the official chronicler of said chaos. Kids practically got her phone surgically attached, live-streaming life's little absurdities. So, Titan, he wasn't exactly a planned acquisition, more like a too many local IPAs at a charity auction and Clara dared me kind of situation. You know how it is. He was a cute little calf then, deceptively cute. He grew a lot and developed this presence. Imagine a grumpy old man who's seen a bit too much, combined with an art critic who has very strong opinions about garden decor, which brings us inevitably to the gnomes. And, by extension, Mr. Blackwood. Our little patch of Willow Creek heaven has its eccentricities. I prefer rustic charm. Instead of some HOA mandated soulless flower bed by our driveway, I'd built this, well, it was a sort of evolving sculpture of old railway ties and wildflowers. Looked great, I thought. Titan had his own area, fenced off, sure, but with a clear view of the street. And I'd put up this sign, hand-painted. Took me a whole weekend. It said, Titan's turf. He has opinions and horns. Underneath, in smaller letters, seriously, don't touch his gnomes. Yes, gnomes, don't ask. Titan had this weird collection of garden gnomes I'd rescued from yard sales. He'd just nudge them around his field, like giant ceramic chess pieces. It was odd, but harmless. Silas Blackwood, HOA president extraordinaire, vehemently disagreed. Harmless was not in his vocabulary. Neither was charming, quirky, or anything that deviated from Article 12, subsection D, paragraph 3 of the Willow Creek Covenant of Conformity, which probably stipulated that all lawn ornaments must be pre-approved in triplicate and preferably invisible. He'd been on my case for months about our unregulated pastoral ambiance, his actual words. The railway ties were an eyesore. My slightly too long grass was a personal insult. And Titan. Titan was basically a declaration of war. That particular Tuesday started like any other. Sun was trying to peek through the Oregon drizzle. I was having my coffee, watching Titan rearrange his gnome army. May was already broadcasting something to her legion of fans, probably about the existential dread of high school. Clara was humming, tending to her herb garden. Peaceful. Then Blackwood's golf cart, the tiny chariot of suburban tyranny, whined its way up our street. He parked it right by my railway sleepers, clipboard in hand. That man could make a clipboard look menacing. He wasn't even looking at me. He was looking at the latest gnome Titan had acquired, a particularly cheerful one riding a squirrel. Blackwood made a noise, a sort of strangled gasp. This is an outrage, Maxwell, he sputtered, jabbing a finger towards the gnome. This is visual pollution. I just sipped my coffee. Morning, Silas. Titan's a bit of an art collector, you know. That was probably the wrong thing to say, because then he did it. He actually reached over my low fence into Titan's territory and kicked the squirrel riding gnome. Kicked it hard. It went flying, shattering into a dozen ceramic pieces. Everything went still for a second. The birds stopped chirping. My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. Titan, who had been peacefully chewing his cud, lifted his massive head, slowly. The look in his eyes. If bulls could narrow their eyes menacingly, that's what he did. He'd seen it. He'd seen a beloved member of his ceramic militia brutally assaulted. What happened next? Well, May's phone caught it all. Every glorious, terrifying HOA golf cart meets 1,800 pounds of furious bull second of it. Blackwood was still ranting about property values and maintaining standards when Titan let out a snort that sounded like a freight train starting up. Then he moved. Not fast at first, just deliberate. One heavy hoof after another, straight towards the flimsy fence separating him from the man who had dared to execute a gnome in cold blood. The fence didn't stand a chance, snapped like a toothpick. Blackwood finally looked up, saw Titan. Really saw him. The clipboard clattered to the ground. His face went from puce with indignation to a rather lovely shade of ghost white. He tried to scramble back towards his golf cart. Too late. Titan wasn't aiming for Blackwood. Oh no. He was aiming for the cart. His charge was a thing of terrible beauty, a blur of muscle and fury. There was this incredible crunch. The golf cart, a moment before a symbol of petty oppression, was airborne, briefly. Then it landed upside down in my prize-winning, neighborhood admired, patch of heirloom tomatoes Clara had been nurturing. With Titan standing over it, snorting like a conquering hero over a vanquished dragon. He even nudged it with his horns a couple of times for good measure, just to make sure it was really, really broken. And May, my daughter, bless her entrepreneurial, social media savvy heart, was yelling, "Oh my God, yes, world star, Dad, Titan's gone viral, again, hashtag Bullv's bureaucracy, hashtag gnome justice." I just stood there, coffee finally splashing onto my shoes. Yep, definitely one of those days. And something told me this was only just the warm-up act. Yeah, that little voice in my head, the one whispering that Titan turning Blackwood's golf cart into modern art was just the warm-up act, spot on. Absolutely 100%, annoyingly correct. Because the main event, folks, was just getting started, and let me tell you, it was shaping up to be a multi-ring circus. The dust from the great golf cart demolition of Willow Creek Estates had barely settled before Blackwood was back. This time, he wasn't alone. Oh no, he'd brought reinforcements, a local police officer who looked profoundly uncomfortable, and a stack of citations that could have wallpapered our living room. Apparently, Titan was now officially a dangerous animal, a public nuisance, and, my personal favorite, a perpetrator of vehicular vandalism with extreme prejudice against HOA property. I'm paraphrasing that last one, but you get the gist. They even threw in something about unauthorized agricultural exhibitions. I think that was aimed at the gnomes. We were summoned, naturally, to an emergency HOA tribunal, or, as I called it, the roast of Leo Maxwell and his bull. We had 48 hours to prepare our defense, which felt a bit like preparing for a spelling bee when the words are all in ancient Sumerian. Clara, bless her, actually dug out the original Havenwood Town Charter from like 18 whenever. Turns out, our little plot of land had some weird legacy agricultural zoning clause, something about pioneer families and the right to keep a milk cow. She figured a bull wasn't that much of a stretch. May, meanwhile, was creating a PowerPoint presentation consisting entirely of memes depicting Titan as a folk hero and Blackwood as a cartoon villain. It was surprisingly persuasive, but then things got really weird. The night before the big HOA showdown, Titan vanished. Just gone. I went out in the morning, coffee in hand, expecting to see him doing his usual gnome rearranging routine, and nothing. Paddock gate still latched, fences intact, just an empty field and a very unnerving silence. Now, I was worried. Sure, he's a big, valuable animal. But more than that, there was this feeling. Titan wasn't the type to just wander off. He was too smart for that, too stubborn. This felt different. May, of course, immediately launched an online offensive, Find Titan. It trended locally within an hour, and the sightings started trickling in. Weird ones. Someone saw a very large, dark shape calmly watching late-night TV through their patio door. Another swore they saw him using a crosswalk downtown, clear as day, waiting for the little green man. One lady from the next neighborhood over even sent May a blurry photo of what looked suspiciously like Titan, thoughtfully licking the dew off her prize-winning roses. It was unsettling, like he was on some kind of secret mission. Blackwood, predictably, escalated. If he was a petty tyrant before, Titan's disappearance turned him into a full-blown suburban Bond villain. He started lurking. We'd see his new, even more obnoxious golf cart, apparently the HOA had a spare, parked down the street, Mr. Blackwood himself peering through binoculars. He tried to inspect our trash cans for contraband bull feed. He even accused the mailman of smuggling Titan out of town in his little white van. The mailman, a burly guy named Frank who'd wrestled bears in Alaska or something, just laughed in his face. It was getting ridiculous. That's when Dexter showed up. Dex is Clara's cousin. And Dex is an experience. He lives in a converted school bus, believes the moon landing was faked on a soundstage in Nevada, and can build a fully functional drone out of a toaster and some dental floss. He's a genius in his own very specific, slightly off-kilter way. He'd heard about Titan's exploits online, thanks May, and showed up on our doorstep with a tinfoil hat to block the HOA's mind control rays and an offer to help. This bull, Leo, he'd said, eyes wide with conspiracy-fueled excitement. He's not just a bull, he's a sign. Despite the tinfoil, Dex was actually a godsend. His drone, the Seeker, was way more advanced than anything I could have afforded. We started systematic sweeps of the woods bordering Willow Creek Estates, an area that quickly bled into some pretty wild, unkempt land owned by, nobody seemed quite sure who owned it. The kind of place that shows up on old maps as unsurveyed territory. It was Dex, a few days into the search, who found the first real clue. We were tracking some unusual hoof prints, definitely Titan size, but spaced with an odd sort of deliberation. They led us away from the manicured lawns, past the no trespassing signs that had long since rusted into oblivion, and towards the old abandoned stone quarry on the far side of Havenwood, a place kids used to dare each other to explore, full of creepy echoes and shadows. The air there felt different, colder, quieter. And then we saw it, in the center of a wide, flat clearing, a perfect circle of scorched earth, about 30 feet across. The grass wasn't just dead. It looked like it had been flash-fried, black and brittle. No burn marks leading up to it. No sign of a bonfire. Just this perfect sterile disc. My heart started doing a weird little drum solo against my ribs. Dex was already deploying a smaller handheld drone, muttering about localized thermal events. And then May, who'd insisted on coming along, pointed. "Dad, look." There, half buried in the scorched dirt near the edge of the circle, was something familiar. One of Titan's decorative horn caps. He had these brass things he sometimes let me put on the tips of his horns for the local fall fair. Made him look quite regal. It was definitely his. How did it get here? And then I felt it. A faint hum. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration, thrumming up through the soles of my boots from deep underground. It was so low, so subtle, if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. But it was there. A silent metallic pulse. Dex felt it too. He pulled off his tinfoil hat, looking genuinely spooked for the first time since I'd known him. "Leo," he whispered, "this ain't no lost bull situation. This is something else." "You think?" We didn't have much time to ponder the mysteries of the vibrating quarry, though. The HOA tribunal was looming. We showed up at the community clubhouse, a place that usually smelled of stale coffee and shattered pickleball dreams, to find it packed. Apparently, Bull versus HOA was the biggest drama Willow Creek had seen since Mrs. Henderson's prize poodle ran off with the aforementioned mailman, Frank. Blackwood, looking even more pinched and self-righteous than usual, launched into his presentation. Blurry photos of the deceased golf cart, diagrams showing the psychological trauma inflicted upon the neighborhood's petunias. He even had a witness, old Mr. Grumbles from down the street, who swore he'd seen Titan levitating over his bird bath. I think Mr. Grumbles had been hitting his cough syrup a bit hard again. Clara, cool as a cucumber, presented the Old Town Charter, highlighting the agricultural clause with a laser pointer. I mostly just tried to look like a responsible, non-bull unleashing citizen. But then May, my quiet, phone-obsessed May, stood up. The room went silent. "Excuse me," she said, her voice surprisingly clear and steady. "Mr. Blackwood, you talk about rules, about property values. But what about respect? What about fairness? My dad's bull, Titan, he didn't ask for this. You came onto our property. You broke something he cared about. He reacted. Maybe," she paused, looking around at the assembled faces, "maybe if the HOA spent less time worrying about the exact shade of beige everyone's mailbox is, and more time listening to people, things like this wouldn't happen. Titan was just saying no to being bullied." You could have heard a pin drop. Then a few people started clapping, cautiously at first, then a bit louder. Blackwood's face was a picture. He looked like he'd swallowed a very angry, very large wasp. The meeting kind of fizzled out after that. No clear verdict, just a lot of muttering and uncomfortable shuffling. We were heading home, feeling a weird mix of drained and vindicated, when a sleek, dark SUV pulled up beside us. A woman in a sharp suit stepped out, sunglasses on despite the overcast Oregon sky. "Mr. Leo Maxwell," she asked, her voice polite but with an underlying edge of steel. "Agent Anya Sharma, Department of Environmental Anomaly Research. We need to talk about your bull, and about some unusual energy signatures we've detected originating from the vicinity of the old Havenwood quarry." I looked at Clara. Clara looked at me. That little voice in my head, it wasn't whispering anymore. It was yelling, and it was saying, "Buckle up, Buttercup. The real show's about to start." Agent Anya Sharma didn't invite us into her sleek government-issue SUV, no siree. We stood right there on the curb outside the Willow Creek Estates clubhouse, the scent of stale coffee and lingering HOA indignation still clinging to the air, while she dropped a bomb on us that made Titan's golf cart demolition look like a minor fender bender. "Mr. Maxwell, Mrs. Maxwell," she began, her sunglasses reflecting our bewildered faces. "Your bull, Titan, isn't just a runaway. We believe his recent activities and his disappearance are linked to highly unusual subterranean energy readings we've been tracking, specifically from the vicinity of the old Havenwood quarry." I glanced at Clara. Her face was pale. "Energy readings?" I echoed, trying to sound casual, like I discuss subterranean energy readings over my morning cornflakes all the time. "What kind of energy?" Before Sharma could answer, Dex, who'd materialized beside us, looking like a kid who'd just been told Santa Claus was real and drove a UFO, chimed in. He was already fiddling with a tablet, his eyes gleaming. "The quarry! I knew it. Leo, remember that weird hum, the scorched earth? I got drone footage. Enhanced thermal on the last pass. You gotta see this." He angled the tablet so Agent Sharma could see. The footage was surprisingly clear, the blackened circle, and then, as Dex zoomed in on a patch of seemingly undisturbed ground nearby, a faint, almost imperceptible geometric outline, a square, with what looked like a seam down the middle. "There's something under there," Dex breathed. "Something artificial. And it was warm, Agent Sharma. Warmer than the surrounding ground." Agent Sharma's expression didn't change, but I saw a muscle twitch in her jaw. "Your cousin is observant, Mr. Maxwell. What your drone has likely identified is an access point. Unlisted, of course." She took a deep breath. "The entire Havenwood area, including Willow Creek Estates, was developed over what was once a restricted government zone. Project designation, Site Anomaly 0. Site Anomaly 0. It sounded like something straight out of one of May's sci-fi shows. "A research facility?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Among other things," Sharma said cryptically. Cold War era. Officially, it was an advanced geological research station. Unofficially, she trailed off, then continued. It dealt with phenomena that didn't fit established scientific paradigms. It was decommissioned in the late 70s, supposedly sealed indefinitely. The energy signatures we're picking up now suggest that indefinitely might have an expiration date, or that something or someone has disturbed it. My mind reeled. Titan? Had he stumbled onto some buried government X file? And you think Titan, what, he opened it? I asked, the idea sounding insane even as I said it. We don't know, Mr. Maxwell, Sharma admitted, but his disappearance, the localized disturbances, they coincide with a significant spike in these energy readings. We believe he was drawn to it, or perhaps he was an unforeseen catalyst. The next few days were a blur of hushed conversations, Dex poring over his data with Agent Sharma's team, who had quietly set up a temporary, very discreet command post in a rented RV on the outskirts of town, and a growing sense of unease that settled over our house like a shroud. Blackwood and the HOA seemed like a distant, almost comical memory now. This was bigger, way bigger. Then the really strange stuff started happening closer to home. One morning, the old scarecrow I had in our vegetable patch, a goofy thing named Stuffy Pete that May had dressed in my old flannel shirts, was gone. Just vanished. In its place, pressed deep into the soft earth, were hoof prints, massive ones. Some were Titans. I recognized the unique chip in one of his front hooves. But others were bigger, deeper, and definitely not from a bull, more like something heavier, something that walked on two legs, but with hooves the size of dinner plates. Clara's carefully tended roses by the fence began to wilt and twist overnight, their petals turning a weird, metallic black despite her best efforts. The air in the backyard felt charged, statusy. The kicker came one evening around dusk. May was out on the back deck, trying to get a signal for one of her endless video calls when she let out a gasp. Not a scream, but a sharp intake of breath that had me and Clara running. She was pointing towards the tree line at the edge of our property, her face ashen. There, just stepping out from the deep shadows of the Oregon pines, was Titan. My heart leaped. He was okay. But then, he wasn't alone. Flanking him, moving with a strange, almost liquid grace despite their bulk, were three other beings. I don't know what else to call them. They were tall, much taller than Titan, and their forms were shifting, unsettling. Not quite animal, not quite anything I'd ever seen. They had hooves, like the prints in the garden, and massive, powerful shoulders, but their heads were elongated, and I could swear I saw a faint, internal light glowing from within their deep-set eyes. They didn't make a sound, just moved with him, like silent, hulking bodyguards. Titan looked at our house, a long, steady gaze, then turned and, with his new entourage, melted back into the trees. "Dad," May whispered, her phone forgotten in her hand. What were those things? Was Titan with them? Recruiting, the word flashed in my mind. He wasn't lost. He was building a damn army. Almost on cue, the hum we'd felt at the quarry seemed to intensify, even here at the house. It was a low, resonate thrum that vibrated right up into your bones, making your teeth ache. The lights in the kitchen flickered. Dex called, his voice crackling with a mix of terror and excitement. "Leo! The signal from the quarry! It's not just random energy anymore. It's patterned. It's like a beacon, a complex data stream. And Titan. I think his proximity, whatever he is, amplifies it. Or he's responding to it. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, they did. Mr. Silas Blackwood, it turned out, hadn't taken his public humiliation at the HOA meeting well. His authority was shattered, his carefully constructed world of rules and regulations upended by a bull and a teenager with a smartphone. And Blackwood wasn't the type to go quietly into the night. We got a call from a rather spooked Darlene Weatherby. She was on the HOA board, the one who'd actually clapped for May. Apparently, Blackwood had been ranting about needing to take extreme measures to restore order and neutralize all threats to community standards. He'd been seen meeting with a very discreet, very dangerous-looking individual, a specialist, someone known only as Wraith. Darlene had overheard Wraith telling Blackwood he could resolve unconventional faunal incursions permanently. That sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with subterranean energy fields. Wraith didn't sound like someone who'd be armed with HOA bylaws. "We have to go to that hatch," I said to Clara, Dex, and May, Agent Sharma having just arrived for an emergency update. "Now, if Blackwood and this Wraith character get there first, who knows what they'll do? They could try to destroy it, weaponize it, or just make things a million times worse." Sharma, for once, didn't argue. Her face was grim. "Site Anomaly 0 was never meant to be disturbed, Mr. Maxwell. If that seal is truly broken, and if unauthorized personnel attempt to interface with what's down there," she didn't need to finish. The race was on, and I had a horrible feeling we were already miles behind. Miles behind? Yeah, that felt about right. Agent Sharma's SUV might have been fast, but the knot of dread in my stomach was doing Olympic sprints. Dex was in the passenger seat, tablet glowing, muttering about cascading energy patterns and geodesic resonance points. Clara and May were in the back, blessedly quiet, but I could feel their tension, a tight wire humming in the confined space. Me? I was just trying to remember how to breathe. Site Anomaly 0. It still sounded like a bad movie title. We skidded to a halt near the edge of the old Havenwood quarry, the same place Dex and I had found Titan's horn cap, and felt that weird subterranean pulse. The air here was thicker now. You could almost taste the static electricity, and that low hum was no longer a subtle vibration. It was a palpable thrum that resonated deep in your chest, like standing too close to a giant, invisible subwoofer. The circular patch of scorched earth looked wider, blacker, and in the center of it, where Dex's drone had identified that faint outline, well, there was no faint outline anymore. There was a gaping, perfectly square hole in the ground. A hatch, metal, dark, and undeniably open, like a wound in the earth. And standing beside it, calm as you please, as if he'd just been waiting for us to show up, was Titan. He wasn't alone. His 3 companions, those towering, unsettlingly graceful creatures, stood slightly behind him, motionless sentinels. They didn't look at us, just stared out into the Oregon gloom, but Titan. Titan turned his massive head and looked right at me. There was no menace in his eyes, no aggression, just a deep ancient knowing that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was like he was saying, "Well, you coming?" Agent Sharma was already out of the SUV, her hand resting on the butt of a serious-looking sidearm I hadn't noticed before. "This is unscheduled," she muttered, her usual composure slightly frayed. Dex was practically vibrating with excitement. "It's an invitation, people, a clear-cut, interdimensional invitation." Before anyone could argue, Titan let out a low, rumbling bellow, a sound that seemed to come from the very core of the earth, then turned and, with surprising agility for an 1,800-pound bull, stepped down into the darkness of the open hatch. His entourage followed, disappearing one by one. "We're not just going to let him go," May exclaimed, already halfway out of the car. Clara grabbed her arm. "Maya, no!" "She's right," I said, my voice sounding strangely distant to my own ears. "We have to see. Sharma, are you with us?" The agent hesitated for only a second. "My orders are to assess and contain. Looks like assessment just went subterranean." The descent was surreal. Rough-hewn metal steps led down into a tunnel that smelled of damp earth, ozone, and something else. Something old and metallic, like forgotten machinery and secrets. Emergency lights flickered intermittently, casting long, dancing shadows. Dex's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating pipes finalizing the walls, thick cables long dead, and layers of dust that tasted like copper. It was cold, a deep penetrating cold that had nothing to do with the Oregon air above. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. It was immense, cathedral-like, carved from the bedrock, and in the center of it, dominating everything, was the machine. I don't know how else to describe it. It was colossal, a sphere of interlocking dark metal plates, easily 50 feet high, humming with that same deep thrum we'd felt above, but 100 times stronger. Faint lights pulsed across its surface in complex, shifting patterns. Strange symbols, unlike anything I'd ever seen, were etched into its skin. Pipes and conduits snaked from it into the walls, disappearing into the darkness. Around its base were what looked like shattered containment units, broken glass crunching underfoot, and unsettlingly large bones. Not animal, not quite human. Titan stood before the machine, his head bowed slightly as if in reverence. His three companions stood a respectful distance behind him. He let out another low bellow, and this time the lights on the machine brightened, the hum deepening into an almost deafening roar. Something inside it, something huge, seemed to shift. That's when all hell broke loose. "Nobody move! Federal target compromised!" The voice was harsh, amplified, cutting through the thrumming air. From a dark access tunnel above us, a figure rappelled down with military precision, landing in a crouch. Sleek black tactical gear, face obscured by a reflective visor, a weapon in his hands that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi blockbuster. Wraith. And just behind him, looking pale but vindictive, was Mr. Silas Blackwood, clutching a very official-looking document. "That's far enough, Maxwell," Blackwood shrieked, his voice cracking. "You and your beast are in violation of everything?" Wraith wasn't interested in Blackwood's hysterics. His weapon was already aimed at Titan. Designation, anomalous biological entity. Threat level, critical, neutralization protocol initiated. "Wait! Don't!" I yelled, stepping forward, but Agent Sharma pulled me back. "He's not attacking. I don't know what he's doing, but he's not hostile." Wraith didn't even flinch. There was a sharp hiss and a dart, trailing a faint green vapor, slammed into Titan's flank. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Titan didn't even seem to register it. Then he shuddered. A massive ground-shaking tremor ran through him. He let out a roar of pain and fury that dwarfed anything we'd heard before. I expected him to charge Wraith, to tear him apart, but he didn't. Instead, with a surge of power that seemed to defy the tranquilizer already coursing through his veins, Titan lowered his head, dug his hooves into the dusty floor, and charged directly at the machine. The impact was cataclysmic. It wasn't just a crash. It was like he'd struck a giant tuning fork. The machine. It screamed. A sound that wasn't a sound, more like a physical wave of energy that slammed into us, throwing us back. The chamber filled with an incandescent, blinding white light. The symbols on the machine's surface blazed like miniature suns. The thrumming roar escalated into a deafening, world-ending shriek. Forgotten alarms blared from the walls, their sirens wailing like tormented souls. The very foundations of sight anomaly. Zero groaned and buckled. Chunks of rock and metal rained down from the ceiling. "The tunnel!" Dex screamed, pointing back the way we came. "It's collapsing!" May was crying, clinging to Clara. Agent Sharma was shouting into a dead radio. I could only stare, mesmerized by the terrifying spectacle. The last thing I saw, before the world exploded into pure, unadulterated white light and crushing pressure, was Titan. Standing tall, right at the heart of the inferno, his body somehow absorbing the machine's raging energy, his eyes glowing with an impossible, fierce light. He looked unafraid, triumphant even. Then everything went dark and silent. The silence was the first thing that hit me. Not a peaceful quiet, but a dead, ringing silence, the kind that presses in on your eardrums after a massive explosion. Then came the taste of dust and concrete, and a throbbing pain that started somewhere behind my eyeballs and radiated outwards. I coughed, a dry, racking sound in the darkness. Leo, are you okay?" Clara's voice, bless her, shaky but there, cut through the ringing. Hands found mine, pulling. Slowly, the world swam back into a blurry, dust-choked focus. We were in some kind of alcove, a pocket in the collapsed tunnel. Dex was already prodding at a crack in the rubble with a bent piece of rebar, muttering about structural integrity and alternate egress points. May was next to Clara, covered in grime but miraculously okay, her phone incredibly still clutched in her hand, its screen cracked but the little green recording light blinking defiantly. Agent Sharma was a few feet away, propped against a fallen slab, her face grim but alert. Of Wraith and Mr. Blackwood, not a sign. Whether they'd made it out or were buried somewhere under tons of Cold War-era concrete, honestly, in that moment, I didn't much care. Survival was pretty high on the agenda. Dex, miracle worker that he was, found a way. A narrow, precarious passage through the twisted metal and shattered rock, leading upwards, not back towards the quarry hatch, but somewhere else entirely. We emerged, blinking and gasping, into a part of the Havenwood woods I'd never seen before, much farther north, near some old derelict transmission towers. The sky above, it wasn't right. It was a bruised violet gray, shot through with shimmering, unnatural colors that danced at the edge of your vision like an oil slick on water. The air was warm, too warm for an Oregon afternoon, and the ground beneath our feet still hummed with that deep, resonant energy, though fainter now, more like an echo. And there, in the center of a clearing that hadn't been there before, a wide circle of freshly disturbed earth, stood Titan. He was waiting. He looked different, straighter somehow, more alert. There was a strange, almost regal calm about him. The dirt and grime from the tunnel were gone. His coat seemed to gleam faintly in the bizarre light. Behind him, his three companions stood like statues, no longer the unsettling, shifting forms I'd seen earlier. They were more defined now, stable, purposeful, sentinels carved from night and shadow. Titan looked at me, just a long, steady gaze, no fear, no anger, maybe understanding, or perhaps it was a farewell. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned. His companions fell into step behind him, and they began to walk, not randomly, but with a clear direction, deeper into the wild, untamed heart of the forest, towards mountains I hadn't even known were visible from Havenwood. They weren't escaping. They were advancing, or maybe retreating to a place only they knew, a place we couldn't follow. The official response was swift and predictably opaque. Within hours, a much larger perimeter than just the old quarry was established. Black vans with no markings, crews in full hazmat gear, geologists whispering into encrypted sat phones. Deer, or maybe some agency even further up the food chain, cordoned everything off. The official story was a localized seismic event, followed by a minor chemical leak from forgotten industrial dumping. Plausible enough if you didn't look too closely at the sky or feel the lingering thrum in your bones. Willow Creek Estates, and much of Havenwood with it, was evacuated. Most people never came back. It wasn't just the official warnings. It was the air, the feeling of the place, the way electronics went haywire if you got too close to the exclusion zone, the persistent, unsettling sense that you were being watched, not by anything hostile, just patiently. Inhumanly. Oakwood Hills became a ghost town within a month. A perfectly preserved monument to suburban dreams abruptly ended. We were debriefed, of course. Agent Sharma was surprisingly understanding, considering. We signed papers, lots of papers, non-disclosure agreements that probably had clauses about alien abduction and acts of God. Then we moved, not too far, just over the county line, to an old farmhouse with thick stone walls, a bit more land, and definitely fewer HOAs. Life found a new rhythm. I started trying to perfect a sourdough starter. Something about the methodical nature of it was calming. Clara began writing, channeling everything into what she called her speculative memoir. Dex, after ensuring our new place was geodesically stable and free of negative ley lines, went off on a new quest involving Bigfoot and a rogue AI in the Cascades. May's raw footage, edited into a haunting, compelling documentary called The Havenwood Hum, became an underground internet sensation, full of blurry images, shaky audio, and a million unanswered questions. It fueled countless late-night conspiracy theories. No one ever found out what happened to Blackwood or Wraith. They just vanished, like a bad dream. Months turned into a year. The world kept spinning. The grass grew long and wild over the sealed-off parts of Havenwood. Sometimes, if you drove by on the highway, you could still see the strange shimmer in the sky over the quarantine zone. Then, one morning, very early, the kind of quiet where you can hear the dew dripping off the leaves, I was out checking the fence line of our new pasture, coffee in hand, and I nearly dropped the mug. There, standing by the far fence under the old oak tree, was Titan, alone. He looked older, wiser, maybe. The strange light in his eyes was still there, but softer now. The air around him shimmered, just faintly, like heat haze on a summer road. He just stood there, watching me. Confirming something, perhaps, or just checking in. Then, with a slow turn of his massive head, he walked up to the far corner of the pasture, behind a small rise, and was gone. When I reached the spot, my heart pounding, there was nothing. No tracks in the damp earth, no disturbed grass. Just the old fence, untouched, and a faint, rhythmic vibration in the soil beneath my boots. I stood there for a long time. Later, when Clara asked what I'd been looking at, I just smiled, handed her a fresh cup of coffee, and said, "Nothing, honey, just a really good morning." But that wasn't entirely true. Because later that day, hidden in the tall grass where Titan had stood, I found it. A small, square patch of earth, the soil oddly dark and disturbed. And in the very center of it, almost completely buried, was a small, cool-to-the-touch metal plate, no bigger than my hand. Etched into its surface were symbols. Strange, intricate symbols, just like the ones I'd seen on the walls of that terrifying, magnificent machine deep beneath Site Anomaly 0. I haven't told anyone. Not yet. The truth, I figure, already had its chaotic, golf cart-smashing, earth-shattering debut. Maybe this new silence, this new, quiet marker in my field, is the real message. The world changed that day in Havenwood. A door was opened, and Titan, once just a bull with a peculiar fondness for gnomes, had been the key. The warning, and maybe, just maybe, he'd be back. Or something else would. That door, it felt like it was still ajar.